Howdy guys, welcome to another episode from the Foundry, where I give monkey brain advice for DMs, along with just general tips and advice and how-to guides using my campaign as an example. Today we're going to be covering some more non-conventional creatures, or monsters that people don't use, I feel, as often as they should, in Arctic areas, for example. Today I'll be covering these, non-common creatures to use in tier 1 play, which is level 1 to level 5. I'll be breaking it down based on each level with boss fights that you can throw at the group at this level and regular encounters to use. I've already balanced these encounters using my balancing methodology along with advice from DungeonMasterDave. So this whole balancing and these encounters is going to be based off a party of 4 players, 2 of which are going to be martial classes and 2 of which are going to be either casters or half casters, which will go from 4 actions at level 1 up to 6 actions or 6 attacks that they can do at level 5. Yeah. So let's get started. An example of some boss fights you can throw at the party at this level would be a white guard drake with a cultist or another magic caster of sorts. There's any generic caster block like Spellix Romwad from Icewind Dale, just giving some range support for the guard drake who's going to be up in front with the party. Another example would be the party having to encounter either a polar bear or a saber-toothed tiger that's been either terrorizing a nearby village or just alone out in the wilderness that they see and they want to, get a trophy from. Obviously, just one or the other. Yeah. Another example would be a druid, which is the basic druid stat block in the monster manual, and you can reflavor it that it's an Arctic druid. And you can use things like blights or other type of more nature-based creatures on the lead up to this boss fight with the druid. While some regular encounters you can throw at the party at this level would be 4 null witherlings. You can use these as a precursor to a more null-based Arctic setting. So these are like outside scouts for the war bands, because they don't need to be fed or need a drink or eat or anything like that. They're just scouting out, looking for a new area or a new source of food and resources for the war band as a party, or as a whole, not as a party. Another idea, if you want to introduce elemental type creatures at this low level, would be a pair of ice mephits. If they're in a a cave system or type of ruins, because of their, I think it's false appearance they get that allows them to not be noticed. Another fun idea would be a pack of bloodhawks. 4 stat block of bloodhawks. But you could reflavor this in a way that Monkey DM suggested, which is flavoring things as a swarm while still using the regular stat block of that creature. That way you can have a more thematic or epic looking fight where, this whole swarm of bloodhawks of 8 to 12 swoop down on the party and start attacking them, pecking at them and trying to rip them apart, being birds of prey that they are, but still using the basic stat block of just a singular or just 4 singular bloodhawks. That way, you can flavor that each one of their attacks is slashing through 2 to 3 or blasting apart 2 or 3 of these bloodhawks at a time, and it just makes it more epic of an encounter without increasing the difficulty too much. Another fun example, if you want to do a more dragon-based Arctic encounter system that leads up to potentially them run into a white dragon, you can have basic kobolds. I know they're very common, but using kobolds with the idea that this is their territory, this is their area that they have been scouting for a while. They've set up these all impromptu traps and makeshift hazards for the party to encounter, so they're fighting in their own home turf. Really use their pack tactics in this group of 4 of them and go wild, get wacky with them. Treat them like these ingenious little creatures that just make and throw together things held together with Dutch tape and gum, and see what the party does. Have fun with it. Now for level 2, it's not that much more different than level 1 party. They get a little bit more health. Some of the classes get to pick their subclass at this point, like wizards, druids, clerics. So they get a little bit of a small buff there, but it isn't so much so that you can start throwing significantly more crazy or wacky things at the party. So for a boss fight for a level 2 party, you can do something like the Lonely Wood Banshee from, I think this is from Curse of Strahd, which is pretty much the basic Banshee stat block with, you know, some cold resistance, and I think one other thing that's different. But overall, it's just a like cold Arctic based or flavored Banshee. You can do a singular Winter Wolf with 1 or 2 regular wolves in its pack that, you know, it's raising or protecting as the end of this boss fight for the group, along with a Yeti in an ice cavern. Now for this one, you can do other fun things for the Yeti, where the Yeti has, you know, this is his lair, this is his territory. The floor is covered in sheer ice, so the party has to roll dexterity saving throws to not, you know, slip and fall prone the whole time. And then there's could be stalactites in the top of the cavern that, depending on what type of attack they're using or how loud they're being, it could disrupt the ice stalactites and have them fall down onto the party, and just include more natural hazards to kind of help balance out the action economy against the singular Yeti. As for regular encounters for a level 2 party, you can just do like a pair of snow maidens, doing a little bit more of the undead ghost haunting, you know, the desolate Arctic landscape, or you can do something very similar to level 1. Again, it's not a major power difference. The big power jumps are going to be at level 3 and at level 5. Now for level 3, 3 and 4 are also going to be very similar to 1 and 2, where there isn't too much of a difference between what you can throw at the party between them. The big difference, or the big jump, being at level 3. Level 4, the ASI, whether it be a stat increase or a feat, doesn't really change the power of the group by too much yet. So you can't just go crazy and throw, you know, a young dragon. I mean, you can, but if you want it to be kind of fair, or, you know, have the party potentially survive this, you know, you have to kind of tone it down just a smidge, because they're not that much more powerful. The next big power jump is actually going to be at level 5. Now, so for level 3 to 4 party, boss fight encounters could be as simple as, you know, a singular mammoth that's protecting, you know, its young, or, you know, one mammoth breaks off from the herd to defend while the rest escape. And that alone can be a challenge. You don't need to give it extra minions or extra mammoths to attack, because each single mammoth does crazy amounts of damage, is going to pretty much drop a player each round if it hits, let alone if it stampedes against them, they're done. Another fun one for this level would be a Revenant. You could give the Revenant 1 or 2 ghosts as minions, or shadows as minions. Maybe not ghosts, actually, because I think those might be a little bit too powerful with their possession. But you can include, you know, like 1 or 2 shadows that are minions of this Revenant to, again, have that like haunted, desolate, barren wasteland that is, you know, the Arctic, if your setting involves that, or just the woods in the Arctic if your setting, you know, incorporates that type of idea. Other fun things you could do for regular encounters would be, you know, you can now bring in the Sabertooths from level 1 and 2 now as a regular encounter. You can have a pair of them hunting out in the wild, and they've been tracking the party for a while, because, you know, that's what wild animals do, and they fight. Another one is the same Guard Drake from level 1 and 2. You can now give it more cultists. I'd say no more than 3, just for action economy purposes. But, you know, now the Guard Drake has 1 or 2 to 3 different cultists that are along with it, with, you know, still caster stat blocks. Ideally, in my opinion, you can give them all melee stat blocks if you prefer. And now, you know, it's a much more organized group. They could be bringing back something to their lair for the ritual of sorts, or they can be out on the search for their item or personage for the ritual, or whatever it is that they're doing. The fun part really comes at level 5. At level 5, the party If they're martial class, they now have 2 attacks. If they're a full caster, they get, I think it's access to 3rd level spells. If they're half casters, they get access to 2nd level spells. And that's a major power jump for the party. So this idea is based around 4 players. So that's going to be, you know, half martial, half casters. So that's about 6 actions that they can do each round, or 6 attacks they can do each round. So for here, or for this, boss fights can get a lot more dynamic. You can do 4 Phantom Warriors that are wandering around in the Arctic area, or are, you know, protecting a sacred gravesite of sorts, or sacred grounds that they were protecting while they were living, or that's just sacred to them, or just a sacred area based on your campaign setting. You can now do a full pact of Winter Wolves. I'd say no more than 4. 4 might also be pushing it to like really deadly for the party, but that can be really fun. I always recommend creatures that have pack tactics to run them at least with 2 creatures, if not 3, at the bare minimum. That way you can properly utilize their entire stat block. While another fun one is the Winter Eldarin. I think that's how it's pronounced, along with 1 or 2 different minions, whether they be like the scouts or any type of those ranged NPC stat blocks, and really utilize the Eldarin's full stat block. Use a bunch of tactics with him. Make it this absolute nightmare in the forest or in the open plains, where it can just teleport 30 feet every single turn as a bonus action with its face step, and just make it go crazy with him. That one's gonna be so much fun with the party. Even if you just do the Winter Eldarin by itself and you properly utilize its teleport every single turn, really forcing the party to have to adapt their tactics and not just hold W and left click if it was, you know, a video game. You can completely throw that out the window with this creature. Another fun one, if you really want to kind of scare the party with only using another singular creature, would be the Frost Salamander. It's got almost 200 HP. It can do like 5 attacks all on its own, and it's nasty. If you were doing the Null Witherlings from level 1 and ramping up Null type encounters, to end that at level 5, a fun thing would be like the Null Vampire with 1 or 2, you know, minions, or what is it? Vampire Spawns, I think is what it's called, or Vampiric Thralls, but, you know, flavor them as Nulls. I don't think you should be using the Vampiric Thrall or minion stat blocks, because I think those are a little bit too powerful for minions. But just throw in some extra Nulls that, yeah, at least 2, no more than 3 if they have multi-attack, and that can really make this encounter very fun. Reason being for the only 2 to 3 different minions is to keep the action economy at about anywhere from 5 to 7 that the enemy party is doing, keeping it fairly balanced for the party. If you didn't want to use a Null Vampire, you could use the Flint, I think that's how it's pronounced, which is another Null creature with this massive flail that can attack 3 different times and deal massive amounts of damage. So pair that with 1 or 2 other Null minions as the final boss, and you got a nice warband final, like, closure campaign of sorts. If you wanted to do something slightly different, if you wanted to do a little bit more undead based, you can have, you know, the Deathlock Mastermind along with some other lower level undead minions, kind of as meat shield while he blasts things from the back lines with his magic. If I remember correctly, I think he is considered a 5th level spellcaster, so he can have some massive AoE damage on his end, but at the same time, your party will also have counterspell at this point. So it should be a fairly balanced encounter, even giving him a couple minions. As for regular encounters, you know, if you wanted something new and different and wanted to kind of stay with the undead theme, you can, you know, throw some Will-O-Wisps at the party, using about 1 Will-O-Wisp for every action that the party has, or every attack that they can do. So for a group of 4, you can do anywhere from like 4 to 6 different Will-O-Wisps. And regular encounter wise, you can use almost any single creature that you've used up to this point, whether it be boss fights or even just the regular encounters and ramp up the numbers, not by too much. I'd say for like level 1 stuff, you can like maybe double them because they do that little damage. But you can use almost anything from the lower levels as a regular encounter for here. You can even use the boss fights as regular encounters for 5th level players. I would hesitate against using 2 mammoths or 2 revenants, but you can definitely throw in a mammoth now with a fellow like younger mammoth companion or a wounded mammoth. That way they can take it down a little bit easier or half its damage, making like an older mammoth. But yeah, that's all for this. I'll be covering other environments and other less used creatures for tier 1 play, and once I finished all those, I'll be moving up to tier 2 play. Hope you guys found this helpful and enjoyable. See you guys next time.